All right, burgeoning viewers, one quick note for you. A subscriber a day in October. If we hit 31 subscribers in 31 days, one lucky subscriber will walk away with the entire Modern Horizons art card series. Additionally, a comment a day. Any subscriber that leaves a comment in every video posted by MTG Burgeoning during the month of October will become eligible for the November Pack Wars. On November 1st, a list of all subscribers that left a comment on every MTG Burgeoning video during the month of October will be compiled, and from this list, one subscriber will be randomly chosen to participate in the November Pack Wars. So hope for peace, but prepare for war. Some time ago, the MTG Burgeoning community participated in constructing Zaxara the Exemplary during a series of YouTube videos on Build a Deck Tuesdays. And in today's EDH Commander Thursday video, we are going to condense all of those videos together to introduce to the world MTG Burgeoning's Zaxara the Exemplary EDH Commander deck. Welcome back, burgeoning community. MTG Burgeoning here, of course, and if you are not a member of our community, click that subscribe button. What are you waiting for? What do you got to lose? And in today's video, we are going to review our Zaxara the Exemplary EDH Commander deck tech. This was constructed by the MTG Burgeoning community over a series of videos, all of which you could click on any of the links below and get a refresher. For anyone who is unfamiliar with Zaxara the Exemplary, it's 1 and a Sultai for a 2/3 legendary Nightmare Hydra with Death Touch. We can tap we can tap Zaxara to add 2 mana of any one color. And whenever we cast a spell with X in its mana cost, we create a 0/0 green Hydra creature token and then put X +1/+1 counters on it. This deck's theme and focus is on X spells. In fact, nearly 1/3 of the entire deck is comprised of X spells, creatures, instants, artifacts, sorceries, and we are going to take a look at that deck tech right now. And before we move any further, we'll just quickly go through our mana base. And we have our standard basics, that's 4 islands, and the 4 swamps, and yes, you guessed it, 4 forests. 1 dozen basic lands, and all 3 check lands, the Dimir, the Golgari, and the Simic. All 3 shock lands, Watery Grave, Overgrown Tomb, and our breeding pool. And to help fetch out those basics and to fetch out those shock lands, we have a Misty Rainforest, a Polluted Delta, and a Prismatic Vista. Those are our 3 fetch lands for the deck. Now, lands that can tap for any of the colors that we need. Of course, we include a Command Tower, the best land in our format, a Reflecting Pool, a Mana Confluence, which is a Command Tower that costs us a life each time we use it, so pay attention to that life total, folks. A Path of Ancestry. Unfortunate that it enters the battlefield tapped, and in a 3-color deck, we kind of want to refrain from doing that. However, it gives us a mana of any color, and if we use that to cast a Hydra spell, then we get to scry 1. Acceptable. Opulent Palace. Again, unfortunate that it enters the battlefield tapped, and honestly, the Opulent Palace is a current placeholder for a Zagoth Triome. Zagoth Triome, and once the Triome becomes available, it will take the spot of the Opulent Palace because it can be fetched and we can cycle it. And an Exotic Orchard. So those are our lands that can tap for any of the colors we need. And here are a couple of lands that are true workhorses. One which may be unexpected and one everyone expects. That first one is Castle Garenbrig. Do not sleep on this card in a creature deck. I can attest to its might. It is awesome. It enters the battlefield tapped unless we control a forest. Taps for a green, but we can tap 2 green and tap this land to add 6 green, and we can only use this mana to cast creature spells or activate abilities of creatures. This is a great card to ramp with. This is a great card to have in your opening hand first few turns. I'm telling you, Castle Garenbrig is an awesome card. You don't need me to tell you how good of a card Gaia's Cradle is. It's included in this deck list because of its ability to ramp, how many creatures we're going to have, and besides, with a third of our deck having X in its mana cost, we want to be able to produce as big a X as possible to make those Hydra creature tokens with as many X+1/+1 counters as possible. And rounding out our mana base are 6 colorless non-basic lands. And we have a Reliquary Tower. I like keeping my cards in my hand. I don't want to be discarding down to 7 at the end of the turn. And we have a plethora of draw spells in our deck, and I want to keep those cards in my hand, not the graveyard. Alchemist's Refuge gives our spells flash for a turn. Very nice. And a Strip Mine in case we want to be the only one with a Gaia's Cradle on the battlefield, or if somebody's being mean and nasty with their Maze of Ith. Rogue's Passage. Make a great big huge Hydra creature and then make it unblockable. If we're dealing with +1/+1 counters, adding Karn's Bastion is nice because we can tap 4 and tap it, and we can proliferate. By proliferating, we're choosing any number of permanents and or players, and then give each another counter of each kind already there. Those would be +1/+1 counters, not just on our creatures, but we have some other cards that would benefit from that as well. And the last land, Temple of the False God. Not great in our opening hand, fantastic when we're ramping up in the mid-game. All right, those are the lands. So let's clear away the lands, and let's bring out the ramp. All right, as promised, the lands are gone, and here comes the ramp. Soul Ring, I don't need to tell you, best artifact in our format. Thought Vessel, that is an artifact version of Reliquary Tower. Like I said before, I like keeping my cards in my hand. I don't want to discard them to the graveyard. Arcane Signet, I like to include this in any deck that's 3 colors or more. Taps for 1 mana of any color and only costs 2. Bloom Tender, 1 and a green. This Elf Druid is a 1/1. We can tap it, and for each color among permanents we control, add 1 mana of that color to our mana pool. So minimally, this is an overcosted Llanowar Elves. Under the best circumstances, we're getting a blue, a black, and a green each time Bloom Tender turns sideways. We've got a Farseek. We're searching our library. In this instance, we're searching for an island or a swamp card. Let's make sure we emphasize that. This isn't just for a basic. We can seek out our fetch lands. I'm sorry, we can seek out our shock lands. Yeah, fetch out a fetch land, right? And then put it in the play tapped. Rampant Growth. Rampant Growth is a Farseek, but it's only for a basic land. And here we have Kodama's Reach, the original, 2 and a green, 2 basics, 1 in the play tapped, and 1 to our hand. And of course, because it is the originator, Kodama's Reach gets to have priority over Cultivate. Exact same thing, just a different name. Next up, we have Growing Rites of Itlimoc for 2 and a green. When this enters the battlefield, we look at the top 4 cards of our library. We may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into our hand. Put the rest on the bottom of our library in any order. At the beginning of our end step, if we control 4 more creatures, we transform Growing Rites of Itlimoc. And when we do, we transform it into a better version of Gaia's Cradle, if that's believable. We can tap for a green for each creature we control, or we can just tap a green and add it to our mana pool. I have been in games where I've had a Gaia's Cradle under my control, and no creatures to tap it. And that hurts, folks. That hurts a lot. Next up, we have a Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. 1 and 2 green. This legendary elf scout with a 2/3 body says whenever another creature enters a battlefield, its owner may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power. We should be consistently drawing cards off of Selvala because of what this deck's theme is. Tap a green, tap this, add X mana in any combination of colors to our mana pool. X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Again, the size of the creatures in this deck are going to be unimaginable. Having Selvala, drawing us cards, giving us mana, fantastic addition. Chromatic Lantern, taps for a mana of any color, and gives lands we control tap, add 1 mana of any color. The Ultimate Color Fixer. Thran Dynamo, investment of 4, a return of 3. Fantastic. No drawbacks, no limitations, no other obstacles. And last for our ramp, we have a Mana Reflection. If we tap a permanent for mana, it produces twice the amount of mana instead. Imagine a Mana Reflection with a Selvala in play. Oh, baby. I want to live in that world. All right, so let's get rid of the ramp and let's bring on some spells. All right, so the next set of spells are going to deal with our +1/+1 counters. And the first one is Retribution of the Ancients. For just a black, this enchantment has tap a black, remove X +1/+1 counters from among creatures we control, so it doesn't necessarily have to be one creature. And target creature gets -X till end of turn. A fantastic piece of removal in a +1/+1 dedicated deck. Win condition is Simic Ascendancy, especially for the purposes of this deck's theme. For a green and a blue, it's an enchantment, and we can tap 1 a green and blue and put a +1/+1 counter on target creature we control. And whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature we control, we put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy. At the beginning of our upkeep, if Simic Ascendancy has 20 or more growth counters, we win the game. It is not difficult to get counters on Simic Ascendancy with this kind of deck. Next up, and here's one of the reasons why. Branching Evolution. 2 and a green, if a +1/+1 counter would be put on a creature we control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put there on instead. So we got Branching Evolution in play, we got Simic Ascendancy in play, we play Hydra for 10, X is 10, X becomes 20, 20 growth counters on Simic Ascendancy, if left unchecked. Game! Next card, Unbound Flourishing, one of the most powerful cards in our deck, and 1 A, B, or C tutor targets. 2 and a green, if we cast a permanent spell with a mana cost that contains X, double X. And if we cast an instant or sorcery spell or activate an ability, if that spell's mana cost or that ability's activation cost contains X, copy it. We may choose new targets. You're going to see why that card, if you can't already, why it's going to be so valuable in this deck. Corpsejack Menace, Return to Ravnica, baby. 2 and a Golgari, this 4/4 fungus says if 1 or more +1/+1 counters will be placed on a creature we control, we double it. So this is a walking Branching Evolution. And lastly, for our +1/+1 counters, and for our tokens, we got Doubling Season. If we create tokens, we create double the tokens. If we're putting counters on a permanent, we put twice that many instead. And that's our subset of spells that deal with +1/+1 counters. Now let's walk through some miscellaneous spells as we round out the rest of our non-creature spells. The Ozolith, straight from the Ikoria Lair of Behemoths. If a creature we control leaves the battlefield, if it had any counters on it, which we're going to have some +1/+1 counters on there, baby, put those counters on the Ozolith. And at the beginning of combat on our turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, we may remove all of them and put it on target creature. So that helps us out immensely by bringing back counters, and from a political standpoint, it could affect the game with other opponents. Demonic Tutor. Not much to talk about here. Best tutor in our format. 1 and a black, any card right from our library to our hand. Diabolic Intent. This is a demonic tutor. Just sacrifice a creature in addition to paying its mana cost. Format staple. Lightning Greaves. Zaxara is going to attract attention. Let's make sure it's protected. Strionic Resonator. This baby will creep around the battlefield for some time and generally becomes a target after an activation or 7. Tap 2, tap it, copy target triggered ability that we control, and we may choose new targets. Of course, if we're in blue, going to pay 1 for that. You're going to pay 1 for that. You're going to pay 1 for that. You're going to pay 1 for that. How about a little infinite mana for those X spells? Penman's Aura, 1 and 2 blue. For a blue, we untap target creature. We untap enchanted creature. A blue, enchanted creature gains flying until end of turn. Blue, enchanted creature has shroud until end of turn. And for a colorless, enchanted creature gets +1/-1 or -1/+1 till end of turn. So how it works is we slap this baby on Zaxara, we turn Zaxara sideways, generate 2 blue mana, use one of those blue mana to untap Zaxara, netting 1 blue mana in our mana pool, and we repeat that process until we have enough blue mana to do whatever we want with any of our X spells. You're going to see in a very short time some of the amazing X spells that little infinite combo can fuel. Garruk's Uprising may be, without a doubt, the most, maybe top 3 most important, powerful cards in this deck. Unfortunately, the Hydra creature tokens generated by Zaxara lack evasion, so there is no trample. However, Garruk's Uprising gives creatures we control trample. Additionally, when it enters the battlefield, if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, we draw a card. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield in our control, we're going to draw a card. And we're going to have a lot of creatures with power 4 or greater. So Garruk's Uprising does a lot of work for us in this deck, and it is a win condition. Kruthix, God of Horizons, is going to be our Simic battery, our Simic mana storage. 3 and a Simic for a 4/7 indestructible god with devotion of 7, of course, to Simic colors. Come on, slow it down, Burgeoning. Slow it down, baby. We have no maximum hand size, and if unused mana went empty from our mana pool, that mana becomes colorless instead. Okay, so Kruthix lets us store up to cast one heck of an X spell. Colonian Hydra comes into play with 4 +1/+1 counters, and when it attacks, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature we control. Game Ender. Asceticism. Creatures we control have hexproof, and we can tap 1 in a green to regenerate target creature. This is a fantastic rare from Scars of Mirrodin. And lastly, we have Primeval Bounty. Boy, I'll tell you, in the games I've played with this deck with Primeval Bounty on the battlefield, it does some work. 5 and a green, when we cast a creature spell, we get a 3/3 green beast creature token. A non-creature spell, we put 3 +1/+1 counters on a creature we control, and whenever a land comes in play under our control, gain 3 life. Primeval Bounty is just an awesomely card in this deck. And to round out our non-creature spells, we just have 3 quick additional removal spells. We've got, of course, Cyclonic Rift. We're in blue, so we're going to overload it. We're going to include it. And we have an Assassin's Trophy to deal with any permanent our opponents control, any permanent unopponent controls, and the same thing with Beast Within. Destroy a target permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 green beast creature token, which, let's be honest, we don't care about a stinking 3/3 green beast creature token. All right, so let's wipe off our non-creature spells, and let's get to our X spells. Just want to create a moment of self-awareness here. I do understand that I misspoke when I was saying non-creature spells throughout that the last remnants of that subset of cards. I meant non-X spells. I did not mean non-creature spells because clearly there were some creatures there. I meant non-X spells. So, last 30, these are all X spells. And these are the spells I was referring to throughout the last subset of cards. Not non-creatures. These are our X spells. Walking Ballista. Get a +1/+1 counter, remove it, deal 1 damage to target creature or player. That is a great recipient for the infinite mana generated by Zaxara and Penman's Aura. Stonecoil Serpent. Comes into play with X +1/+1 counters, reach, trample, protection from multicolored. Amazing right there. All right, so now let's unleash our Hydras. Here we go. Lifeblood Hydra, X and triple green, has trample, which we love, and when it dies, gain life and draw cards equal to its power. Voracious Hydra, double green with trample. We love that trample, baby. And when it enters the battlefield, choose 1. We double its counters, or it fights a creature we don't control. So it acts as removal and a potential one-shot for one of our opponents. Mistcutter Hydra. Love when a spell can't be countered. Love when it has protection from blue. It's got haste, but it lacks trample. Speaking of trample, Primordial Hydra. Double green, when it enters the battlefield, it gets X+1/+1 counters. At the beginning of our upkeep, we double the number of +1/+1 counters on Primordial Hydra, and if it has 10 or more, it has trample. Altered Ego. X2 and a Simic, it can't be countered. And it enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it enters with an additional X+1/+1 counters. Hooded Hydra has the Morph ability. If it's turned face up after we cast it for 3 colorless mana face down, we can put 5 +1/+1 counters on it. And if not, then it enters the battlefield from our hand with X+1/+1 counters on it, and when it dies, put a 1/1 green snake creature token onto the battlefield for each +1/+1 counter on Hooded Hydra. Steelbane Hydra. Remove a counter from it, destroy target artifact or enchantment, all for the cost of 2 and a green. Hungering Hydra. Can't be blocked by more than one creature. Giving this bad boy trample is, just awesome. Whenever Hungering Hydra is dealt damage, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So if it survives the damage and it gets bigger and it can only be blocked by one creature, win condition. That's a one-shot win condition. It might take a couple of turns to have it happen, but believe me, powerful. Vastwood Hydra, when it dies, it's unfortunately evasionless, similar to Hungering Hydra. But when it dies, we may distribute a number of +1/+1 counters equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on it among any number of creatures we control. And our last Hydra is the Hydroid Krasis. X green and a blue, flying trample. When we cast the spell, gain X life, draw X cards. X is halved and rounded down each time. And those are our Hydras. All right, so now let's get to some draw spells. Finale of Revelation. We draw X cards. If X is 10 or more, instead we shuffle our graveyard into our library, draw those X cards, untap up to 5 lands, which could be a Gaia's Cradle, and we have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. Great draw spell from War of the Spark. Love it. Love it. Pull from Tomorrow. X and double blue. Draw X cards, then discard a card. Stroke of Genius. X2 blue. Target player draws X cards. This is another fantastic recipient for a nice chunk of mana generated by the Zaxara Pemin's Aura combination. Have a player draw their deck and leave the table unhappy. Thassa's Intervention. X and 2 blue. We pick one. Either we counter target spell unless its controller pays twice X. I am not a proponent of counter spells. It's not a favorable thing to do in my meta. However, I do not mind choosing number 1. Look at the top X cards of our library, pick 2 of them, and put them into our hand. Thassa's Intervention lets us dig through our library, and with the amount of mana we can generate, we can dig deep. Blue Sun Zenith is X and triple blue. Target player draws X cards, and we get to shuffle it back into our library for future use. Gadwick the Wizened, X and triple blue. It's a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, draw X cards, and whenever we cast a blue spell, tap target non-land permanent an opponent controls. And the next couple of cards are not necessarily card draw, but they're card advantage. And the first one is Death Denied. X and 2 black, return X target creature cards from our graveyard to our hand. And this is much more favorable than a spell like Patriarch's Bidding or Living Death, because as you can see, the majority of our creatures have base power toughness 0/0. So including those cards in our deck, we'll just send them back to the graveyard anyways. And lastly, we have Wildest Dreams. XX and a green, return X cards from our graveyard to our hand, and then exile Wildest Dreams. All right, moving on down to our removal. Black Sun Zenith, X -1/-1 counters on each creature, and shuffle it back into our library for future use. Erebus's Intervention, it's an instance. X and a black, choose one. Target creature gets -X till end of turn, and we gain X life. Or we exile up to twice X target cards from our graveyard. We don't have much with graveyard recursion, so Erebus's Intervention could be a very nice way to hose those strategies. Next is Profane Command. It's a sorcery, X and 2 black, and we can pick any 2 of the following 4. Come on, camera, get in the game here. There we go. We can pick any 2 of the following 4 modes. Target player loses X life. We return target creature card with converted mana cost X or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. Not entirely favorable unless it's one of our ramping creatures. Target creature gets -X till end of turn, or up to X target creatures gain fear until end of turn. The fear provides evasion, and that's a good thing for our non-evasionless, or non-trampling Hydra creatures. And fear, of course, they can't be blocked except by black or artifact creatures. And lastly, we have Curse of the Swine. X and 2 blue, exile X target creatures, and for each creature exiled this way, its controller puts a 2/2 green boar creature token onto the battlefield. And I can assure you we are not worried about a 2/2 boar creature token. All right, next up are some of our win condition spells. Then there are the big ones. Torment of Hailfire, we know this one. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. Win condition. Villainous Wealth could lead to an eventual victory. X and a Sultai, target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. We may cast any number of spells with converted mana cost X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. Imagine if we're able to copy that with Unbound Flourishing, do it twice to the same opponent or to multiple opponents. And lastly, for our win conditions, we have Exsanguinate. X and 2 black, each opponent loses X life. We gain life equal to the life lost this way. And we're down to our last 3 cards. And they are Animist's Awakening. X and a green, reveal the top X cards of our library, put all lands from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and now I'm thinking this probably should have been included in our ramp subset. So I missed out on that one, but it's prioritized as an X spell, so maybe I didn't miss that one. You let me know in the comments section below. And of course it has the spell mastery mechanic. If there are 2 or more instant and or sorcery cards in our graveyard, we untap those lands. And in going back and referencing our evasionless Hydra creature tokens, we have Open into Wonder. X and double blue. X target creatures can't be blocked this turn. Until end of turn, those creatures gain whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Historically, when casting this spell in a game, the drawing of cards usually doesn't happen because the game is then over. Can't block our huge Hydra creature tokens or our Hydras. The game is not going to last very long. And lastly, Gelatinous Genesis. X and a green, we create XX green ooze creature tokens. I will share a full disclosure. This card is definitely leaning on the fence towards becoming exiled from the 99. It is tough because it doesn't give +1/+1 counters. So there's absolutely 0 synergy with any of the +1/+1 counter cards in our deck. That was an oversight during the initial construction of this deck. I have cast this multiple times in gameplay, and each time I was like, oh, no +1/+1 counters. So Gelatinous Genesis may be on the way out. But I thought I would share that from gameplay, that it does not have any synergy whatsoever with our +1/+1 counter spells. And folks, this is the deck that you created. The MTG Burgeoning community created this Zaxara the Exemplary deck. I am most proud of the deck list. It functions very well, and it has played very well also. If you want to become a part of the MTG Burgeoning community, check us out on Build the Deck Tuesdays, where we currently are building Riku of Two Reflections. This is MTG Burgeoning, and this is EDH Commander Thursday, and I am most proud to share this deck list that the community built with the rest of the world. Want to become a Pack Wars combatant? 4 easy steps. Step number 1. Click on the link below in the description or go to www.buymeacoffee.com/MTGBurgeoning. Step number 2. Select either membership or support. Membership will enroll you into Pack Wars for $5 each month. Support will cost $5 for 1 month. Step number 3, complete payment information. The name you use will appear on the site. Use your real name, use your YouTube handle, or use no name at all and be anonymous. Be sure to include your email address in the information. Step number 4, most importantly, prepare for war.